was easy to kind of ignore too. And so we'd always joke that we had a popsicle, a bottle cap, popsicle stick and a bottle cap and a helicopter, go make the mission happen. And I think if you can summarize a helicopter pilot, that's it. It's like, all right, what do I have? What do I need to do? And when do I need to get there? And let's get it done. And that's the mentality of a helicopter pilot is, hey, we can do this. I think by nature of being able to hover, and like you said, being able to land anywhere, right? That you are inherently gifted with and responsible for, frankly, the ability to insert and extract or rescue anybody that needs it. It's such an incredible capability. And the more you dance with that, the more you can learn and see and do what you can actually do with it, the more your confidence goes up and the more you realize a helicopter pilot that there really isn't. The only thing that limits you from accomplishing anything is your own mind.
Got on. Welcome to the Leading with Vulnerability podcast. I'm your host, Yuma Barnett, and today my guest is Chris Ronis. I should have asked before we got on. And call sign Switch, I guess. Is that what you?
That's right.
So
yeah.
Chris Switch Ronis. Which when I was reading it, I was like, this guy belongs in a Marvel movie or something. That's a Hollywood name if I've ever heard one. And I'll be curious to learn the story behind the Switch call sign, to see how you got that. We got another helicopter pilot on here. Did great things, and he's just now in retirement. When I say just now, like within the last couple of weeks, Chris has moved over to the other side. He's done that twice. He once a former enlisted guy who moved over to the dark side, officer side. I won't hold that against him as a career NCO. But I'm going to pass this over to Chris. Let him introduce himself, and we'll get into that conversation.
Yeah, so you nailed most of it. Look, Chris Ronis, rhymes with bonus is what I tell people, but it's just not spelled the same, right? And then they go, "There's that bonus guy." Next time they see me, but yeah, man, look, I grew up in coal mining country in Wyoming, and the days before the internet, in small town where in Wyoming there's only 400,000 people in the whole state, so you split that up, that's like 2 people per square mile. It's a long way to go to borrow a cup of sugar to have a conversation at the same time. And during that time, I had an aunt and an uncle that was in the Air Force and was just really intrigued with that and always kind of wanted to fly. And just took a long path of trying to figure out how to do that and learning it on my own. Because, back in those days, you got pamphlets in the mail from the universities that wanted you. Yeah. And if you could figure out how to find applying for the academy, which I tried to do, and all those things. So, but did that, joined the Air Force, enlisted because in college, while I went to college, went to the University of Wyoming is what I ended up doing. Because my friends were like, "Hey, this is where we're going. Come on." and had the opportunity to do ROTC there, and the Air Force was doing what they called a reduction in force. And so I was at a field training camp, and they were like, "Bye, we don't need you. Let the whole camp go." And I'd already had some challenges. I had a lot of speeding tickets because, again, Wyoming, it's a big state. I thought the Air Force would appreciate someone who would like to go fast, save time, be safe while doing it, and no. So I had to get what's called a morals waiver just to enlist. And I was like, well, if I didn't have morals, I wouldn't have told you I did these things. But but it was all good. And at a young age, people saw something in me and believed in me and helped me achieve those goals. You can never do it on your own, right? And so graduated from the University of Wyoming, and then went and enlisted because there was no commissioning opportunities, not really. And that was the best decision I made because it gave me a respect and an understanding for the enlisted force that I would never had as an officer if I hadn't have done that. I just thought, I'm going to enlist and I'm going to be like a chief master sergeant in 4 years, no problem. I'll be an E9. No, so I'm going to earn it. I'll earn it. I'm going to do all the work. Right? And no, that's not how it works, man. And just really gave me a great respect for NCOs and the leadership that they have, right? And that is the fabric that holds it all together, right? NCO Corps is clutch. While I was enlisted, I randomly bumped into someone who used to work at that ROTC detachment on a temporary duty assignment in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, at a TGI Fridays. And she was like, "Hey, so you're an officer now?" I'm like, "No, no, I never went that route," because she had left before I'd made that decision, or that decision was made for me. And and then people give me a hard time everywhere we would go. I'd bump into somebody I know from Wyoming, and they're like, "How is that possible? It's the least populated state." I'm like, "Well, we're all friendly."
That's right.
Yeah. So anyway, she came and found me and basically said, "Hey, I work at headquarters ROTC now, and commissioning opportunities have changed. And are you still interested? And do you still have all those speeding tickets?" I'm like, "Well, they don't just go away." Yes, I still have them, but I haven't gotten any more. Oh, good. And early on as an airman, I had great supervisors and mentors that I was able to share my goals with, right? And they were able to help me achieve those goals by basically guiding me on what not to do, right? Hey, don't do this behavior, do this one. And while I was in ROTC, I was going to go to a brand new career field called Combat Rescue Officer. I was getting ready to apply for that and found out that they only wanted the initial cadre of that to be folks who were prior enlisted pararescuemen already that had that experience, right? Because it's a huge training pipeline. They wanted that first batch to be those kind of leaders. So that opportunity wasn't there. But the Air Force said, "Hey, how would you like to be a pilot?" And at the time, I was 29. The age cutoff was 26. I was too old to be a pilot in the Air Force. And I'd also had a little hitch in the giddy at part of the commissioning thing I was telling you about at Wyoming. They send you to the nearest Air Force base, which in my case was F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And they would give you a full physical, run you through and make sure you had what it took to physically be a pilot. And at that time, I learned that I had one eye that was 20/20 vision and the other one was 20/25 because of astigmatism. And they told me, "Sorry, son, you'll never be a pilot in the United States Air Force." And I took that kind of hard. So fast forward, now I'm 29. They want to know if I want to be a pilot. I'm like, "Yeah, I want to be a pilot, but I got this thing." And it was needs of the Air Force, right? Technology had changed. They've been able to figure out some things. And they had me go see the optometrist, and he put these funky glasses on me and put my head in this machine that we all use now. And said, "Can you see everything?" "Yep." "Okay, you've now set the precedent for a new waiver, and go forth and have a good time flying." I was like, "What? Okay, I guess we're doing this." So that's kind of how that happened, and but I just never gave up on the dream, really, and mainly it was make sure I didn't make poor decisions, right, to shoot myself in the foot and close doors on opportunities before they happen. That's kind of my story. From there, I was blessed with the opportunity to go helicopters. I was in pilot training when 9/11 happened. And that's when I saw, at that time, I was really eager about wanting to be a fighter pilot. But as you go through pilot training, what you learn is what you want to earn is your wings. And every aircraft is awesome. Every mission is great. You gotta decide, which one you want to do, and how you want to do it, and which one you want to be a part of. You go to heavy aircraft in the Air Force, and you become part of a team because it's a crewed cockpit. If you like to really be on your own and be your own boss and not have anybody else in your chili, fighter pilot's the way to go. What I found though is myself as a wrestler and a football player, most of us were attracted, football players and wrestler types were attracted to low flying aircraft like C-130s and helicopters and and A-10s. And I was really surprised to see how many folks in that category just like to get their hands dirty, get in the mud. And when 9/11 happened and I saw that SOF was going in to get things done and fighter pilots were flying circles over the skies in New York, and that's a little facetious, right? I mean, they did a lot of great things. But at that time, I could see that's kind of where the action was. And I had a good friend I'd gone to University of Wyoming with that we'd come full circle, and he was an instructor at the pilot training school at Vance Air Force Base, and he had flown MH-53s for AFSOC and was telling me all the stuff, and I just really didn't know much about helicopters until I reconnected with him, and then I was like, man, that's what I want to go do. And so that's where I got bit by the bug to go fly helicopters, and got lucky enough to go to Fort Rucker and learn how to fly, and the rest is kind of history. Did some survival school flying and flew Hueys and flew H-60s in combat rescue,
Yeah.
and got to do a lot of great things with both airframes. So that's kind of my story, Yuma.
Yeah. That's awesome, and we're gonna dig into that a little deeper. We're gonna start off though with the first question I ask every guest that comes on here is, I'd like to just know your definition of vulnerability.
Oh man, I thought this one quite a bit because there's a lot of what vulnerability isn't, right?
Right.
It's not just diarrhea of the mouth telling the world your problems and expecting empathy or sympathy, right? It's not that, and it's not doing it in a way that shows weakness, and it's not. What else it's not is it's not maybe something you do right off the bat. You kind of need some street cred to be able to show vulnerability, and what I mean street cred is humanity. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all humans having a human experience, and being human. And I think vulnerability is really more about authenticity and being genuine and real, and having the courage to maybe share a story from your past that was a trying time or a challenge or a goal that you pursued, like the one I just shared with you. But you do it in a way that benefits others, right? That's vulnerability. It's the point is not poor me. The point is, hey, I'm human too, and here's what I did. Here's how I got through it, and hopefully some of these lessons help you. To me, that's vulnerability.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Great definition of vulnerability. So if we go back way, jump in the way back machine, when you were choosing, between what service branch you were going to do, what led you to the Air Force? Why'd you choose the Air Force route?
So for me, I always had a keen interest in the Air Force. Just I always loved airplanes. I don't know why, just something about it. Um, a couple of things that kind of I think vectored my path were things I was exposed to at an early age. When I was 15, I got to go spend a summer in Alaska with my aunt and uncle, and my uncle was a flight engineer in the Air Force, and he and a couple of pilots owned their own air taxi service. They had a little dirt runway on right off of the Susitna River near Talkeetna, and I spent the whole summer just going with them and flying in little puddle jumpers and having a good time, man. And it was just really cool. And so I was bit by the flying bug, and got exposed to the U.S. Air Force there, and really saw how well they took care of people. And then fast forward about maybe 4 years after that, I got the opportunity to work at the coal mines myself, and that's a 1 hour bus ride out to the mine and an hour bus ride back. So it's a lot of time to read. And um, my dad's a huge reader, and he was always handing me a book. And sometimes I'd be like, not my style. But he handed me a book called Chicken Hawk. And any helicopter pilot that's out there knows this book. This guy was a Vietnam helicopter pilot, and it's basically like his journal, right? And he just tells us, but he tells it matter of factly, like, here's what we did, here's how we got out of the situation. And I just found that just awesome. And so that's where I really got bit by the helicopter bug. And to be honest, the Air Force didn't look like it was working out. I considered going into the Army. I met with an Army recruiter, and going to warrant officer, going to be a walk right to the warrant officer candidate school, because that is a great way to do it. And in hindsight, I probably would have done things maybe one or two ways differently, only because these two ways tend to fly more and you tend to get the aircraft you want. The Army warrant officers, those guys fly all the time. In the Army, the officers don't get to fly as much, right?
Right.
So it's a little different. And I've even had friends who, when I was in combat rescue, they were the cream of the crop, man. The weapons school graduate patch wearers gave up their commissions to go to the Army to go fly for the SOAR. Like, that's awesome, right? But um, at the time, it was kind of the same issue for the Army. They weren't really taking a whole lot of people, so it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
And the Air Force did.
Yeah. So, and obviously, you went in enlisted first, and there's I know quite a few people in the Army that have gone enlisted to officer, or a lot of people that are considering it, especially right now, as the military is kind of in a shift from the GWAT era to now. A lot of guys and gals are trying to figure out what's next for them, whether it's going to go, try to be a helicopter pilot, go drop an officer packet, be an officer. What was that transition like from you? How much did being an NCO first really help you become an officer, and then through your career before, up until now where you hung it up?
Yeah, being enlisted first, like I was saying earlier, it really gave me an appreciation for that side of the house, understanding how those things work, and really gave me a huge understanding of, I mean, promotion cycles and those things that are near and dear to the enlisted corps in the Air Force, right? And I was surprised to find out that when I got my commission, there's very little training or exposure to that to officers, right? They don't have a whole lot of that. So for me, I think the challenge was a couple of fold. There's a battery of tests you have to take. For us, it's the Air Force officer qualifying test, and one of the big uh, things I learned early on, again, days before the internet, you'd go to the clothing sales and you'd buy a book that was like a study guide of these tests. But there were actually two books. The book for Air Force officer qualifying test at that time had a batch of aviation related questions and then a batch of all the other questions. And so you could get two books to do those. And what I figured out is if you have a goal, if you have something you want to achieve or a dream you want to go after, tell people about it because you never know who's going to jump out of the woods to help you. And have a good attitude, man. Just always have a good attitude because if you bloom where you're planted and leave the place where you found it, be surprised who wants to help you on your journey. And that's where just got all that guidance. I learned to do all those things, and that transition was challenging because I'd already had a bachelor's degree, so I had to figure out, well, how do I get commissioned if I already have a bachelor's degree? The Air Force kind of had these rules that to earn a commission, you also had to earn a bachelor's degree. I'm like, well, I already have one, and did just the application process. I think I applied 10 different times to 10 different commissioning programs across the time of my from high school, graduating high school through college to enlistment, and it was just timing. Timing is key.
Yeah.
That's everything.
Yeah, that sounds like, I mean, timing obviously is key to a lot of stuff in a military career, but so is resilience and never giving up. I think and it shows in your story, kind of, you didn't take no for an answer, and you always followed back up. And there's a waiver for everything, and it depends on kind of the climate that the military's in. How do you, if you don't, how do you just kind of keep a positive mindset, in your opinion, when you're going through kind of a season where it doesn't look like things might go your way? How do you stay, you still show up every day to work like you're supposed to. You put in the work, you put in the effort, you don't slack off. How do you stay motivated, I guess, when you're not sure
I
what the
mean,
future looks like?
there's a pile of lessons there, but the simplest thing is, look, you can only control what you can control, and really, it's all out of your hands, right? But you can control that attitude, and through simple experiment, you'll figure out pretty quick that if you walk out the door with a negative attitude, crappy things just start to happen. You walk out the door with a smile, no matter how bad things are going. At least you're 20% smarter because you kicked off some chemicals in your brain. For me, I'm faith based. That's always helped me a lot. There were two things I learned early on as a kid. No matter what your faith, these are true statements. Your promise that your needs will always be met. And I always just had well, no matter what happens, it happened for a reason. And this too shall pass, right? So as long as I just kept going and smiled as best I could, and man, there were some struggles. Dude, I could tell you some stories that make your hair curl on the back of your neck and be like, what? But you just have to look for the good in every situation. When they talk about silver lining, a lot of people are like, whatever, silver lining, look for the silver lining. No, no, no. Like when you really stop and think about that, look at a storm cloud. That cloud is dark and ugly, and it is so easy to stare at the obvious bad things that are happening, and then you overthink them,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So for me, I no kidding, surf that silver lining. I look for it.
Yeah, when I was, with my time in the Ranger Regiment, there's a lot of young guys and girls now in the Ranger Regiment, and a lot of them are looking too far ahead. And I would always tell them, hey, worry about the job you have now, give it 100%, and the next job will probably take care of itself. But if you're over focusing on, you want to go be a recce platoon, you want to go be a sniper, you want to go do this, you want to go be a dog handler. Well, you're a team leader right now. So be the best team leader in the platoon, and that other stuff will start to shake itself out and take care of itself. So
Yeah.
I agree with you there. And then, I mean, the uniqueness of just being a helicopter pilot, it's I've been on a lot of 160th aircraft going into places going, I don't know how the hell they're going to land this helicopter in this Nangarhar Valley on this little patch that there's farming on. But it's because, I mean, what is the helicopter pilot? What is that mindset? When you're doing the things that you do, delivering us to these places, what is just in your mind?
Man, I'm going to answer that question, but I got to come back to this previous one real quick because there's
Yeah, go ahead.
two other things you need to know about when you talk about how do you get to those things. I had a great dog, and dogs are amazing, right? Because they're the only creature on the planet capable of unconditional love no matter what, right? And that bond with that dog really helped me through some tough times, right? It's a good thing they don't live very long, because I don't know if she lived as long as me. I don't think I could. Like, I'd have to go before her because I wouldn't have made it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But the other thing is friends and family, dude. Like, staying connected to the people that you trust the most and reaching out to them to help when you've got a tough decision to make or a goal you're trying to achieve or when it didn't go right. Just someone to console with, right? And that's that vulnerability piece that a lot of people are scared to share. But when you have those people you trust, man, that community is hands down the single most important thing that probably helped me get through besides faith, right? So, and my own attitude. But without those ingredients, dude, there probably wouldn't be a Chris Rona sitting here today.
Right.
I'll tell you. So, helicopter pilots, man, and how we think, and it's interesting because, now the Army, you guys have the DoD's largest inventory of helicopters, right? But in the Air Force, we're kind of like the redheaded stepchild, right? Because it's a fixed wing Air Force, and I say that in jest because helicopter pilots know where it's at. By the way, helicopter pilots in the Air Force have the highest retention rate of all aviators in the Air Force because we love what we do, right? And and in that, there's another tier, right, within helicopters of pecking orders. Your 53s doing AFSOC stuff, your 860s doing combat search and rescue, your Hueys doing incredible everything from nuclear security to DV support to some continuity government type missions up in DC, right? And test and all these things. And they do all these different things, but within that community, they joke, "Hey, skids are for kids," you know, things like that. But we would say, here we guys would say we're the bastard redheaded stepchildren of the redheaded stepchildren, and that's not really true, right? But the point is that it's kind of a resourcing thing when you've got something that is that simple of a machine. When you talk about cost, the least expensive thing to fly around, we it was easy to kind of ignore too. And so we'd always joke that we had a popsicle, a bottle cap, a popsicle stick, and a bottle cap, and a helicopter. Go make the mission happen. And I think if you could summarize a helicopter pilot, that's it. It's like, all right, what do I have? What do I need to do? And when do I need to get there? And let's get it done. And that's the mentality of a helicopter pilot is, hey, we can do this. I think by nature of being able to hover, and like you said, being able to land anywhere, right? That you are inherently gifted with and responsible for, frankly, the ability to insert and extract or rescue anybody that needs it. It's such an incredible capability. And the more you dance with that, the more you can learn and see and do what you can actually do with it, the more your confidence goes up and the more you realize a helicopter pilot that there really isn't. The only thing that limits you from accomplishing anything is your own mind.
Yeah. Yeah. So if somebody's, what should somebody expect who wants to maybe follow a pilot path in their career?
Man, I'll tell you what, back up when I went to pilot training at 29 years old, I had a bachelor's degree, an associate's degree from the Community College of the Air Force, had a bachelor's degree in business management, and I had two separate master's degrees. And I will tell you that force pilot training was the single most difficult academic thing I'd ever done in my life, even harder than those things. And it's harder because it's a compressed timeline, right? And there's so much to learn in such a short amount of time. And I think that's the real challenge. When I first was trying to do that, I was frustrated with the aptitude tests. Like, why do I need to be able to memorize all this stuff? Oh, now I know why, right? So, but also, you know, uh, it's just a process, right? And as long as you don't give up, you'll get through it. You have that good attitude, the instructor pilots will want to help you get through it. And I think that's the ticket. That it is really challenging, and it was academically for me a challenge because uh, I wouldn't say I'm dumb, but I do not enjoy reading books. I'd rather listen to an audiobook than read one. And but I am hands on, man. Give me the machine, I'll figure it out. Give me the tools, I'll go work on it. Really love mechanical thinking. And so for me, the big challenge was locking myself up in my apartment for 12 hours a day on the weekend, just studying the books and learning everything I needed to learn and making sure I knew it. And a typical day in pilot training for the Air Force, in the very first phase, the first 4 hours could be academics of weather and aerospace physiology and other challenging things like that. The second block could be you, no kidding, going to do a 4 hour flight of basic aviation maneuvers before you go to solo, and and proving to the instructors that you can do everything you need to do to take off and land that aircraft safely, right? And then the last 4 hours could be an instrument uh, sortie in the sim where you're having to know all the rules to instrument flying. And I mean rules, like it's a book this thick. And so that can be overwhelming when you're having to know that much subject material just for one day in pilot training.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's I think it's a huge misconception across the military about how academically challenging some of the professions are in the military.
Oh yeah.
Being a ranger was not like being a pilot, but when I found myself sitting in there doing calculations for breaching and explosives and stuff, the Yuma that was in high school that just wanted to go blow doors down didn't realize I was going to have to do all this math in the army. And I think it is the civilian,
Right.
our industry civilian counterparts don't realize just how academically, mentally challenging service can be in all fields within the military. I'm sure you learned a lot of life lessons being a pilot, and it could probably be a whole podcast on its own. But what are some keys that you just kind of? I mean, you're just now in the transition, but I'm sure you've used them as a husband, as a father. What do you know? I'm taking this mentality or this this practice with me to the other side of the uniform.
Man, there's so many things, Yuma, but I'll give you three right off the bat. Right. First one is a little jingle we would say, and that is so goes the mission planning, so goes the mission brief, so goes the mission. Right. And the point is, the more you spend planning and preparing for that, and then communicating what it is you're going to do, the better success you'll have at doing what it is you're trying to do, right? Because in when you're on the ground in a 1G environment, this is kind of a strange analogy, but just imagine your brain, your logical brain to think is this big, right? And you know this going through combat and all those things. When you get to the point where you're briefing, now you're having to communicate those things. You're having to go through the plan. You're getting asked questions. You're looking for clarity, and you're starting to get where your brain's a little bit smaller. But the second you get in that aircraft, if it's not in your head or on your knee board, good luck, right? Because now your ability, the amount of brain that you have left to consume for free thought is smaller because the rest is being utilized to fly that machine. And then when you get in combat, it's even smaller, right? So that's a powerful tool in life because you can plan and prepare for anything. And that's something that I'm teaching right now. But we'll get into that later. But the other one I'd say is kind of along those same lines is a term we'd say staying ahead of the aircraft in Air Force pilot training at that time, we were flying T-37s. Now I realize that this aircraft is in the bone now, right? Like that's part of why it's time to retire, right? But in the T-37, you'd be cruising at 250 knots. And man, if you've never gone that fast before in your life, that is fast. And before you know it, things are up on you. Imagine driving your car at 100 miles an hour, not stopping for stop signs or stoplights and having to know where they are and figure it out and time it. Luckily, there's none of that stuff in the sky, but you still got to know when you're going to turn, where you're going to turn. There's this great jingle we had: who you are, where you're going, how high, how fast, what's next. And you're going to be safe, but you got to have fun because you can't have sex when you're dead. And I learned that from a Navy fighter pilot. And he was awesome. But that was over 20 years ago, and that sticks in my head because those are the things when you talk about staying ahead of the aircraft. And it's the same thing that applies to life. Thinking about, hey, what's going to happen a month from now? What should I be thinking about a month from now? You could overdo it. Don't do that, right? I think the last one is what we call situational awareness. And you hear everybody, you can even see it in the emails and stuff in the military now. People will talk about, hey, FYSA, right? For your SA, for your situational awareness. But I think unless you've really been in any kind of three-dimensional environment, right, where you're flying through space and time and different altitudes, you don't really have the full appreciation of what situational awareness is. It's not just, I mean, it's knowing what's going on around you at all times, which is really hard to do, right? And we call that an SA bubble. The more knowledge and awareness you have, the bigger your bubble. And the idea is that you can be predictive in what's happening or what's going to happen, right?
Yeah,
But it doesn't matter how big your bubble is, something's always going to get you
yeah,
by surprise.
yeah,
Those to me are some of the big takeaways.
yeah. It's funny. This is totally off script here, about how you mentioned the situational awareness portion. Since transitioning out of the military, I've realized that sometimes that's almost a hinder for me being present, right? And I've had to hone that in a little bit, right? Because
Yeah.
it's just part of being, always switched on, especially when you're out in the public, you're in a public environment. I'm always trying to figure out what's going to happen two steps ahead, even if I'm just sitting down and having dinner with my wife, which drives her nuts. Um, uh, th- what I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
You're spot on. I think that is the biggest challenge for any of us when we leave the military in any kind of, honestly, any kind of career, but especially for those that are combat related or we're really having to think ahead all the time. It is really hard to shut that off. And I'll tell you, I'm challenged with it too. And I have forced myself to learn to be in the moment. I had a life event that occurred that helped me appreciate the moments better. But I spend, dude, no kidding. Like you want to talk about vulnerability? Chris Ronis, will admit to you now that I spend time meditating,
Yeah,
and I use a device called Muse 2 because I'm a knucklehead, and this thing teaches me how to do it. You know what I mean? But I found that once I learned to do that and you're in that moment, 5 minutes of that feels like 8 hours of a good night's sleep sometimes.
yeah,
But what it does is it helps me, especially as a parent of kids that are 9, 7, 6, and 2. It helps me stay in that moment with them instead of freaking out all
yeah.
the time.
Yeah, that's funny. You mentioned that about being vulnerable. You know, therapy is one of the best things I ever did. My therapist, she said, I just want you to go sit out in a field one day. You got to sit there for 60 minutes. No phone, no book, no nothing, and just be there.
Yeah,
I was like, what the? That's easy. I can do that. It was the hardest, longest 60 minutes of my life, So
yeah,
it's funny. It's just part of the, things that we will start to realize as you transition out of service, especially us who spent a long time in service. And we got a couple more questions about your time in uniform. We'll kind of transition to what you're doing now. But I'm just curious, what was your most challenging day in uniform? I get a
mm,
various answers from, combat situations. A lot of guys that are married and have kids, it was just saying goodbye, so many times. What was your most challenging day? How did you get through it?
and I tell you, I thought a lot about this one because I haven't really talked about this, but I'm going to talk about it. By the way, being in the moment, one technique I use too is just challenge yourself to something. Just pick a spot on the wall and stare at it for as long as you can without letting your eyes move off of it. Right?
Yeah.
That's a quick one. But dude, for me, I'll tell you the story is that I was in a situation where had an incredible opportunity. I had been asked to go build a brand new squadron that didn't exist at FE Warren Air Force Base to support the helicopter units that we had there. And I was about a year into command, and it was coming up on Thanksgiving, and we were life was great. Mama was working, I was working. We were long days. We had three beautiful kids with a fourth one expected to be on the way at 37 weeks, and came home from work one day, and my wife had just had a celebration at work for this child that we were about to deliver in a week. And she goes, I had cake today, and the baby didn't kick. I'm gonna go check it out. She couldn't find a heartbeat, and we went to the hospital immediately. This is at the end of the day, right? This is like 7 o'clock at night. So I'm a squadron commander, right? I'm in charge of this unit, and I went through the most difficult experience I've ever had in my life. We lost our daughter that day, and if you are not a parent, that's hard to process. If you're a parent, like, oh my God, I can't imagine what would happen to my kids and how I cope with that. And I recognized a couple things right off as we were going through that. I had kind of like two mindsets going on. I had the emotional, trying to process the situation, but also the logical, hey, I got to lead my family through this. I got to lead my unit through this. They know we're having this child. Like, I've got to be this example of how to cope with a life experience while I'm coping with it. I can't explain I just knew that, that, that I had to be as logical as I could. Right. And that's hard because that's an emotional experience. Right. And so for guys and gals, it's a different experience, right? And that doesn't mean saying less pain on either side. But there's the challenge, 8 o'clock at night. So I had to do some things. I had a major that worked for me whose kids were high school kids and they had experience with babysitting our kids. So I had to reach him and say, I had to build a quick, hasty plan. How are we going to get through this? We got our kids with us in the hospital. They need to get to bed. They got to go to school, And so this is how life, throws things at us, right? But again, it's okay. Where's the silver linings? What are the things I can do? I obviously know what I can't do, and so to me, that was the most challenging time because it wasn't a night; it was a 6 week period, and we were reeling from a couple of losses that we'd had in the squadron before that, and so it was just extremely emotionally challenging.
Yeah.
But people came out of the woodwork, and true to the form, the thing I learned the most is that all those things I was worried about that night, got to get this performance report done, got to get that thing done, got to get this spreadsheet updated, got to do it. Guess what? None of that stuff mattered. And fortunately, and the guys in the unit watching this or hearing this, I don't know, but they ran that unit. They were amazing. They took that unit to the best unit in the major command previously, just before all this had happened, and they were incredible. And they all knew what to do, and they all did their jobs. This is a week before Thanksgiving, man. We weren't ready to be very thankful. They all brought us a Thanksgiving meal.
Oh wow. That's that's an amazing. Thanks for sharing that. It's I'm sorry for your loss. First of all, it's terrible. I got 4 kids of my own here. Um, I just want to talk about a couple things in there, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Being a leader, right? Being a leader, when a leader encounters obstacles, it can trickle down on the group, on your subordinates, your reports. And then you have this guilt. You're guilty because you're not serving your family the way you want to feel, the way you want to. You're guilty because you're not serving your unit the way you want. You're not showing up your best. You know, it's a hard thing to be a person in leadership, I think, especially in the military, and have a major problem like this that's can be, that's public, that people know about, that people start to tiptoe around you. They don't want to, it's just
Yeah.
it's a difficult situation as a leader. As a leader, how did you kind of approach that, or did they approach you?
Well, a little bit of both. I'll tell you. So a couple. First of all, I'm always, going to take the lessons learned from that. And again, in telling the story, I'm going to share those with you, Yuma, before we cut loose. There was three big lessons out of that I think were powerful. But the first one was just being in the moment, right? Like after that, every moment with my kids was completely different. When they would come to me, Daddy, you want to do this? I would be like, oh, just a minute. I'm working on this. No, what is it? You have my undivided attention. In that instance, and to your question, the major kudos go out to my leadership, right? My leadership saw that, yes, very public situation. There was no opportunity to keep that to myself, right? That never existed. And so we went ugly early. My wife and I put together a social media post that was very tactful and polite and just said, look, this happened. And we still feel blessed. And out of that came incredible responses from people in our community. And one of those was from one of my captains who I was actually having difficulty with. A great guy, but we were having some behavioral challenges with some programs he was running. He was having some issues, and I had to give him paperwork just a few weeks before this. And this guy's wife had put this very incredibly thoughtful response on our post, and I said, "Geez." So my wife, did you see this? And she says, oh yeah, they experienced the same thing. I'm like, really? I never knew that about this troop, and so he had sent me a note. Hey, sir, um, if you want to shoot the breeze over a cup of coffee, I'd be happy to bring you one. I mean, right away. I'm like, that would be great because as a dad, you don't know who's been through this. We don't talk about it, right? So I'm on my own basically, but she's got, women are great at communicating their issues and helping each other with them. Men, we're terrible at it. We don't want to talk about our emotions. So she had a whole need of people helping her, and I'm just kind of over here. What do I do now? And this guy reached out to me. How you treat people, Yuma, matters, right? And even though I had to discipline him, I always treat him with respect, and I did that with everybody. Look, I love you, man. We're just trying to correct the behavior. Let's keep going. And if I hadn't, I don't think he would have reached out to me, but he ended up being one of the huge pieces that helped me get through. Someone I led became a leader in my life
Yeah.
because he had that experience. He had tactical lead, right? He's like, and here's what he taught me. He said, look, yeah, we went through this and it's a month-long celebration. And we as men want to heal faster than our wives. Don't do that. Heal at her pace. Wow, thank you. Powerful piece of information that preserved my relationship. You know? And the second thing that he told me was when that event happened to him, happened to coincide with a big celebration they do. And it's the same time that the programs that he managed had a lot of effort that needed to happen. And that's why he was failing at them. He was having to spend that time with family. And I was like, well, why didn't you tell me? And the answer was simple. I wouldn't have understood. Holy cow. So, that was a big part of how I did it. As far as walking on eggshells and stuff, my leadership gave me time off. There was no leave policy at the time in the Department of Defense for stillbirth. Now there is.
Oh wow.
Now there is, and we call that Ava's rule. So my daughter had a purpose, and she wasn't the only one. I'm sure there were plenty of service members that had experienced a similar thing around the same time frame, that year or whatever it might be. Uh, but in my case, it just so happened that my leadership chain went to a Group Commander '06 to a numbered Air Force 2-star general to a 4-star general major commander who called me 2 weeks later just to see how I was doing. That's leadership, right?
Yep.
That dude, by the way, Robin Rand, incredible 4-star general, cares about his people like you wouldn't believe, still to this day, always caring about people. And he's long since been retired, but he still reaches out to people to see how they're doing, right? And so he just wanted to know how it was. And I said, sir, I learned some things. I'd like to share them with you. He goes, shoot away. And we talked for like 20 minutes. And he said, Switch, can you put that in an email and send it to me? I'm going to take it to Corona, which is a big Air Force meeting of all the generals, right? And they took it to the DOD. And when I, 8 months later, when I was completed my command, a new leave policy came out from the DOD and all the services that included a policy for stillbirth for leave.
Wow.
So, right? Amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is.
So that's the story.
That's amazing.
So that,
Thanks again for sharing that, Chris.
yeah.
To kind of close out the military side of you, you're fresh in transition, right? Just going through
Yeah.
it. Um, if you're looking back on it right now, where you're at, any people need to know this type piece of advice. Anything you wish you would have done different? Anything like that?
Man, I there was some hard times, but I wouldn't have changed any of it because when you go through a hard time, as long as you can push through it, that is the way, right? That's what makes you stronger. When you go to lift weights, you're tearing muscle,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. That's right.
But that's how you get stronger. And so I would just say that really it's attitude is everything. Like I never looked at the things that happened to me if they were something I perceived as negative as, oh, this happened to me. I always try to look at it as how is this happening for me or for someone else? What good can come of this? And I just had a really blessed career, man. I really did. And coming out of it, I people are like, oh gosh, you must missed it. No, I don't. I miss the people and I don't mean that in a negative way. What I mean is, dude, I got to do everything I ever dreamed of doing. I got to do it all. And I'm grateful for that. And so in my opinion, I max performed it the best I could. Who Chris Ronas is compared to Chris Ronas. By the way, 18-year-old Chris Ronas would have said, "You meditate? What?" You know, that was not part of his agenda. But
Yeah. Yeah. My 18-year-old Yuma would say, "You have a podcast called Leading in Vulnerability," and then he would have disowned me. So it's interesting how that works. So what's next for Chris? What are you doing in your post military life?
well, part of why I retired was two reasons. I taught you about the moment, so I really want to spend time with my family and be able to have my parents spend time getting to know their grandchildren. We were locked down in Hawaii between COVID and just being a long way away for 4 years that they didn't get to see their grandkids, and so I want to do that. But the second one is I really wanted to serve in a higher capacity. I am like many organizations and people frustrated with our 22 a day veteran suicide problem, and there are a lot of people getting after this problem, man. I mean, a lot. So I'm not trying to be one of those, but I also in the military, besides being a helicopter pilot, I was an acquisition and requirements expert and programming guy. That's what I did as my other day job, and I approached this problem looking at gaps, and I found two major gaps. I mean, I really nugged this out. I'm still analyzing the snot out of it, but there's two major gaps. One, there's nothing for that person who is in their darkest moment and they're by themselves and they're possibly self-medicating. There's nothing for them to really act on to be their own hero, because chances are slim that we'll get there. When they make that decision, it's within minutes. If the delay is not already there, right? There's not enough time for someone to get there. So what is that? So I built something. It's a checklist that I call You Matter. Matter is an acronym we use in aviation when the wings are about to fall off and the engines are on fire. That's what we use to stay calm in the Air Force. Maintain control, analyze the situation, take the proper action, refer to the checklist. There's no checklist for this. So I built them one. And all they got to do is pull this out of their pocket and read it and calm themselves down in that dark state, and they can get out of there. The other part of it is whatever that problem is, the other big, big, big gap, whatever that problem is, it didn't happen in that moment. It didn't start then. It started way over here, right? And when you really think about it, you could go to any installation in the Air Force, I know, I'm sure the Army too, and you could find where the suicide prevention training is. You could find the gym. You could find all those things. But unless it's soft, you're not really going to find that whole human performance element. If I'm a brand new whoever to whichever service, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, you name it, where do I go to grow? Where do I go to just make a better version of myself? It doesn't really exist. So I created this thing based off of aviation lessons learned called You Matter. And that's where I'm going, because it really, my little slogan is get awesome and stay awesome. And stay awesome is the hard part.
Yes.
It's the hardest part, because you don't feel like doing something today. I'll do it tomorrow or whatever, And so, but in aviation, and especially helicopters, by the way, another thing about helicopters is anytime the wings move faster than the machine, it's an emergency waiting to happen, right? And we're always training for the emergency, but we're always training for the mission and the emergency during the mission, right? And so aviators think differently as a result of that. But we've learned it all. You spend all this time learning about your machine and what all the possible emergencies are that could happen, and you train for them, you practice them, you prepare for them. You have memorization tools. You have all these tools. And I thought, why can't we apply these tools to life? Because you're either in a struggle, you just got out of one, or one's coming for you. And so guess what? You could take the time to have a conversation with yourself through a curriculum I built. It's just you, man. It's private. You're just writing notes to yourself, and you're going to organize a group of friends you trust, and you're going to share whatever you want to share with them about how you're just going to grow and get awesome. Bad habits you want to break, good ones you want to make, whatever else it might be. And then I give you these tools that are aviation based lessons learned on how to identify the potential for struggle in your life based on your living and build a plan to respond to it instead of react to it or avoid it altogether. And then when that crisis comes, not if, that time that is too hard for you, if you did the work, you have a tool that will help you get out of there. And guess what? For the guys that do this, by the way, very few actually needed this because they intervened themselves long before that moment. So that's what I'm doing. I wanted to serve in a higher capacity, and I felt that as a retired colonel, as silly as it sounds, I thought I could help more folks in the services and our veterans by doing this than I ever could, continuing to press with what I was doing active duty.
Yeah. That's awesome, Chris. I mean, you're just continuing to serve, and I'm sure everything that fills your cup as well. Doing all that stuff, service is in our blood. I think when we're, especially the senior leaders that make it in that realm in the military. Another thing I want you to talk about a little bit, because I'm familiar with it, and I've counseled and mentored people on it. But Bunker Labs, what is
Yeah.
Bunker Labs?
Hey, Bunker Labs. Hey, one more piece about that transition piece, though, is that when we join the military, right? They give us everything: uniform, training, food, roof over our head. They end up giving us a community, people we grow strong with. We get unique in our tribes, right? And then when we get out, we lose all of that, right?
Like instantly.
Purpose is instantly.
The
right?
badge,
purpose is
access is gone. The uniform's gone. It was shocking to me just how quick it is, right?
It is.
That was hard.
But see, even doing what you're doing now, it hasn't really changed for you. I recognized my purpose, but it took me this wild roller coaster of a ride to realize that it hadn't changed. I was a lifeguard in high school. I became a combat rescue helicopter pilot, right? and wasn't thinking that all I thought I was flying a helicopter and that was my purpose. No, the purpose was helping others,
Right.
right? And so,
Service.
yeah, and in combat rescue, we have a credo that others may live, right? And so that credo is still my purpose. That's where I'm going. But so all that to Bunker Labs is awesome, and they're on that line, right? And so Bunker Labs is a nonprofit organization that helps veterans and military spouses and their veteran spouses to become entrepreneurs. They have they have what they call Veterans in Residence program that you can apply for. We just missed the application period. They just had it this September. They do it once every 6 months, so the next one will be coming up in 6 months. and but if you're a veteran and you're either already going down the entrepreneurial path or you want to, this is a great program because they basically take you and they do what they call a cohort, and you meet once a week, and you submit your goals, and they really help you bridge that gap of all the hard lessons learned when it comes to standing up a business and becoming an entrepreneur. And kind of an underlying tone about it all is, hey, this is a way to get after some of our current threats too, because the more veterans that are out there standing up businesses, the more other people that we don't want doing business aren't.
Yeah.
I jest a little bit about that. That's not a Bunker Labs line. That's Chris Ronis's observation, right? But in opinion, frankly, I think there is so much opportunity for veterans when you transition. I loved the TAP class. I think it's improved a lot. I've gotten to sit through it a few times in different generational periods. The one I just went through was incredible. It could have been just the people who were teaching it. The VA guy was phenomenal. He was like, dude, 180 days out. Don't miss a mark. Start your paperwork now. There's some powerful lessons learned on that we can get to. But for Bunker Labs, dude, I'm telling you, if you're a veteran and you're even dabbling in entrepreneurship, go apply to the virtual residence because it has helped me immensely. You network with so many other veterans who are doing business, and you just have this, um, just this. It's like high speed opportunity to just really learn so much stuff so fast, but at your own pace. But you just get connected to all these people and folks that it's just incredible opportunity to help grow a business. Yeah.
Yeah, you said some words in there. Connect with others. I think that's the key for veterans, especially the longer time you spend in service. Is connect. Bunker Labs, Honor Foundation, all the other transition foundations that are out there now.
Oh yeah.
It keeps you in the tribe, and you get to transition together, right? You get to slow a little more of a slow off ramp instead of just a steep cliff that you're jumping off of.
Yeah.
Chris, I appreciate you sharing your stories here today. It's amazing. So I I gotta ask, right? Because you're from Wyoming, you went to the University of Wyoming.
Yeah. Go Pokes.
What Josh Allen?
Yeah, man.
Big
Josh
fan?
Allen.
Big fan?
Heck yeah. Are you
Yes.
kidding me? You see that guy? How can you not be a fan? Come
Yeah,
on.
yeah. I love me some.
Even if,
I love Josh Allen. And I'm hoping that Josh can put the old 4 Super Bowls in a row for the Bills. Where they go there and lose. I hope he can get that pushed to the back burner and bring Buffalo, blue collar city, what they deserve up here. I think he was a perfect fit for that city when he went there.
then he just brings that attitude. Like what you see, that's a Wyoming
Yeah,
attitude that he
yeah,
brings with it. Hey, what can we do here, guys? Big smile on his face,
yep,
let's get it done,
yep.
and he
No,
would have made a great helicopter pilot, in my opinion.
yeah, I think
But
a lot of people from where we came from, New Mexico, Wyoming.
yeah,
When I was when I we'd have a group of new Rangers come in, we'd line them up in the hallway and do their you see what platoon they're going to go to, and a lot of people are asking, "What's your what's your test scores?" Where I just want to know where you're from and what'd you do growing up. And if they said I grew up on a farm or I grew up out west and I worked in a coal mine, I said, I don't care what your scores are. You can come work for me because I know you're gonna put you're not scared to work and you're not scared to problem solve
yeah.
and everything else that we can train you to do. So
Yeah, well, growing up in those environments forces you to learn resiliency at a younger age, right?
absolutely.
In a different way, and that doesn't take away from anybody else, but we just know
It's just different. Yeah.
it's just different. I mean, in Wyoming, in Cheyenne, Wyoming, they're still proud of themselves for not plowing the roads. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
like it's a matter of pride. It's not because they can't plow them. It's not because they
Yeah.
don't have the equipment. It's
Yeah.
because we don't need to plow the roads. We're Wyomingites. We just drive through that stuff. All right, a
Right.
plowed road would be nice. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. And then, after I've lived in the South for 20 years now, it better not get wet rain, a little bit of sleet, and the state's going to shut down for the next 2 weeks. So it's
because they're just not used to it,
yeah,
right?
yeah, that's right. But Chris, thanks again. Thanks for coming on here. Amazing. Best of luck to you in your transition. And just thanks for what you're doing for that 22 a day. That's kind of why this whole podcast started. I was like, I'm sick of it. What instead of just saying I'm sick of it, what can I do about it? So, uh,
I know you're trying to wrap up, Yuma. I would say that, I admire everybody that's doing all this great work behind that because it is the right thing. But I would challenge them all to think about uh, maybe a different number, and that is how many data are we saving,
that's
and
right.
how are we advertising that,
That's right.
and how are we encouraging those people to tell their stories to show others it's okay.
That's right.
You know,
That's a great perspective of how many are we saving, right?
how many are we saving?
It's easy to focus on the bad numbers, right? Because that's what gets the clicks, which is unfortunate,
Well, and it is, but I can't help them.
right?
I can help their families that are left, right? But the 22 a day, rest their souls, and we'll see you in Valhalla. But I can't help you in this life, man. But there are plenty of others that could use that help, and they need it before that moment. They
Yeah,
need it over here, right?
yeah,
So,
absolutely. All right. Well, thanks again. It's a great time for you. Everybody else out there, like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
yeah.